Hello, how are you doing today?
I'm not gonna talk about the weather, but aside from that, I'm great.
We're not going to give a weather report.
No weather
That's
reports
right.
until the sun is shining.
Yes, this is a financial planning, I guess, live. So maybe we should tone down the weather, but that's okay. Um, should we start off with introducing ourselves?
Yeah. My name is Danica Waddell. I am the president and founder of Xena Financial Planning. We are a fully virtual firm. We work with mostly women in the tech industry. And so we're going to talk about some issues that a lot of our clients are dealing with right now. And I'm joined by.
Yes, I am Mariana Llamas, and I'm an associate planner here at Cena. Um, And before we talk about our topic today, which is basically tender offers, merger acquisitions, if your company is going through any of these, what you should know from a personal finance perspective. So before we dive into that, we started this new thing where we are highlighting some women in business that has inspired us. So for this week, there is this, I guess, this fintech company built by Latinas for other Latinas called Sheenix, and their mission is to close the wealth gap. So their app provides financial education, career planning, salary negotiation. So you're connected with like a coach through that. So pretty cool.
Yeah, and we think the app actually isn't out yet, but we're keeping an eye on it. So maybe we'll post an update when it launches. But sounds like a great app. Anything that's closing the racial wealth gap and or the gender wealth gap, we're all about. So excited to see what those ladies put out.
Yes, yes. Okay, so to dive in, do you want to go just like
Yeah.
as a starting point? Do you want to go through what a tender offer is?
Yeah. So, I mean, the general topic for today is about tender offers and any kind of M&A transaction or merger and acquisition. But I think the reason why we're talking about these, again, before even defining them, is just, we're seeing the IPO market, certainly last year, was very not good.
Flatline.
So after having a great year in 2021, there weren't a lot of IPOs in 2022, but what we are seeing a lot of instead is things like tender offers, lots of M&A activity. So there's been lots of companies that our clients work at that are being acquired by another company, merging with another company, and there's a lot of implications that come along with that. Again, from a personal finance perspective. So we just wanted to talk about those because we're seeing so many of them right now. And so in the past, it's been all about IPOs. Now it's all about tender offers and M&A transactions. And so, yes, I would love to just define what the heck is a tender offer. And basically, a tender offer is when you work for a company and somebody comes in, it could be the actual company, it could be a third party, but basically offers to buy your company stock. And so the example that we're working through right now with many people that are our clients is Stripe. So Stripe is a company that is private. Many people have been sort of anticipating this, their IPO for a long time. They said earlier this year, they're going to do something within the next 12 months. And that thing has turned out to be a tender offer. So in the case of Stripe, what they're doing is they're offering, all current and former employees, they're paying $20.13 a share, I believe, to buy back their company stock. And so there's a variety of reasons why a company might do this. In this particular instance, it's about providing liquidity to these current and former employees because a lot of their stock was getting ready to expire. People were very upset about that. And so Stripe is basically offering this to employees as a way to get them compensated for this stock that they've been sitting on for, the best part of a decade.
And this is very different than when a company goes public. Um, and with specifically with Stripe, they even went and raised. I think their last funding, they raised a couple $1 million just to be able to go through with this tender offer because
Right.
you mentioned. there were a lot of stock getting expired
Yeah.
the next couple of years, and they needed to do something about it.
Mhm.
So I guess, do you want to go and define merger acquisitions, or do you want to stay on tender offers and kind of walk through what, as an employee, if this is happening at your company, what are some things that you should be thinking about?
Let's stay on tender. Yeah, good question. Let's stay on tender offers for a minute. So essentially, there's lots of different ways that this could play out. It's in, like an IPO, once the company's public, you can buy and sell stock. Well, usually there's a lockup period, but once the lockup period's over, that stock is freely traded. With a tender offer, it's much more restricted, right? So you have this one-time offer. It's, for a very limited period of time. There might be other restrictions. There might be only certain shareholders that are eligible to take advantage of the tender offer. So maybe it's only employees, maybe it's certain types of employees. You might only be able to do a certain amount. So if you have a lot of stock, they might only allow you to sell back a percentage. So there can be a lot of restrictions. With an IPO, once the lockup period's over, you can hold on to stock or sell it as much as you like. But this tender offer is generally, it's a one-time thing. Can be a lot of restrictions. And so I think from an employee perspective, there's a few things that, are relevant that you want to think through. Number one is going to be about the taxes. So that if you are selling back a bunch of company stock in one transaction and recognizing a whole bunch of income all at once, that is a huge tax bill that you're probably looking at. And so what we're seeing with some of our employees in the Stripe transaction is, they're being taxed as much as 52% on the amount that they're selling back to the company. So being really aware of what the tax implications are. The other thing that we're seeing with Stripe people is, this sort of like multi-state issue where, if you lived in California when you first started working for Stripe, but then you moved to New York or Florida or some other state, they're going to apportion out taxes to those states based on when you live there. And so it gets very, very complex. And so we're not going to go super far in the weeds on that particular part of it, but just knowing that there's a lot of potential tax ramifications when a tender offer happens is probably the biggest thing to think about. Some of the other considerations are, how much of your portfolio is tied up in your company stock? Do you have immediate cash needs for that, for that asset? Is there something that significant amount of money that you need money for, whether it's down payment on a house or putting your kid through college or something like that. So you might actually need the cash. So those are a couple of the big considerations that you might be thinking through as you're sort of deciding whether or not to take advantage of a tender offer.
And you don't necessarily have to do anything, right? You can just keep the stock and hope that maybe down in the future, like another tender offer will be offered, or the company might go public, or something like that, where the opportunity to sell the stock will present itself, but you are putting yourself in a position where maybe down the line nothing will happen, and now you're stuck with just a bunch of stock.
Right. So that's a great point. You're not obligated to participate in a tender offer. You can do nothing. Keep your stock and say, I'll wait for another potential liquidity event in the future, whether it's a tender offer or an IPO. I think in the case of Stripe, it's pretty interesting because the company valuation, the fair market value of the company stock has changed quite a bit over the last few years. And so, 2-3 years ago, it was like $40 a share, and now they're offering people $20 a share. And so I can understand why people might not want to sell all of it on the basis that, it might come back to 40. Like maybe I should hold it. But there's a risk that, it won't even be worth 20 in the future. So there's a lot to be said for the guaranteed, you're going to get $20 a share or whatever the offer is. And the longer you hold, you're just opening yourself up to price changes, or maybe the company, maybe there's never a liquidity event in the future.
Right. And we've been hearing this from our clients and other people where there is something to be said about just selling everything and then forgetting about it,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like not really having that much worry in the back of your head about this stock that you hold.
Yeah.
So yes, the value might be a lot lower than what you were expecting, but at least it is something. And then just think about, like you mentioned earlier, what are your goals? Is there anything that you've been holding off because you didn't have the means? Is there any debt that you would want to pay off? Or is it something that you want to invest for in the long-term future?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. So, I mean, it's a really great opportunity to, if you're not already working with a financial advisor or a tax advisor, I would highly recommend engaging one as soon as you can in this process. Sometimes you don't get a lot of notice. The Stripe thing happened really fast. So they kind of announced, we're going to do something in the next 12 months. And then within a month, I think it was like tender offers happening, in April. So there wasn't a lot of notice, but, we were able to onboard a couple people pretty quickly in that time period. So if you don't already have somebody that you're working with, I think it's really helpful to have a third party that understands these transactions, understands the taxes, but also can help you think through, like, what is this money for? What am I doing with it? Like, once you get it, are you putting it all in a bank account, or is it going to be money for retirement in 30 years? Or some combination of goals, but really evaluating what you're going to do with those funds.
The sooner, the better. And again, with the tax professionals, they get booked up around this time. So having someone that understands very well equity compensation already ahead of time is a major plus.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So the other side of it, I mean, mergers and acquisitions have some similarities. So some of the issues are going to be the same. But essentially, kind of what we're seeing there is a lot of companies that our clients work at are being acquired, and, they're either getting a payout of, all their cash, or all their stock is being converted to cash, on a single day, or it might be a combination of cash and stock, or some other, there could be, different permutations of how that might look. So a couple that we're dealing with right now is Seattle Genetics, which is being acquired by Pfizer, and that's a fully cash deal. So if you have a whole bunch of company stock, it's all going to turn into cash at $229 a share, I believe, is the agreed upon price. And there's no set date on that, but sometime probably later this year. So again, could be a huge tax bill. If there's anything at all that you can do to reduce your income in the current year, you may or may not have much control over that, but certainly the stock is all going to be converted to cash at once, and you do not have a choice. So there's no, like, I don't want to participate in this transaction. You're participating. And then the other transaction that we're working with, or the other merger we're seeing, is Adobe and Figma, which, there's some question about whether or not that one's going to go through with antitrust laws and everything. But in that case, Adobe has agreed to pay Figma employees a combination of cash and Adobe stock. So if you are a Figma employee and you own Figma stock, yours would convert to some cash and some Adobe stock. So you don't have any control over that transaction, but you do have control. Once you get the Adobe stock, you can make a decision about whether or not to sell that right away. And given the fact that this is such a high tax year, more than likely you probably wouldn't sell the Adobe stock right away. But the cash payout, you would have, you don't have any control over that part of it. So that would all happen in this calendar year from a tax perspective.
And have you seen any mergers and acquisitions, like the details of those offers, be a little bit more flexible as opposed to these two that we're talking about, where you really don't have any choice of what you're going to do? It's like, this is what you're going to do. You're going to sell it, or you're going to receive cash for everything that you have, or you're going to receive a little bit of cash and the stock of the new company, and that's it.
Yeah, I have seen situations where you can make an election on whether or not you want more or less of cash versus the acquiring company stock. But generally speaking, I would assume little to no control, but every deal is a little different, just like every IPO is a little bit different. And so you don't really know kind of what one is going to look like until your company declares it.
Yep. So I guess it's important to really attend all of those informational meetings or sessions that the companies do offer during this period. That way you are very well aware of what you can or can't do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think one of the things that comes up with mergers and acquisitions more so than a tender offer is, there's definitely some uncertainty about whether or not there'll be some restructuring or some reorganization in any kind of merger. So I think there's, a little bit more potential for layoffs and all that kind of stuff after a merger. And I don't think that's really a consideration when you're talking about tender offers. So that's just something to keep in mind. There can also be, retention bonuses and other stuff that's happening in the context of an M&A transaction. But many of the issues are the same. So we're still looking at taxes. We're still looking at stock concentration, although probably not such a big deal. If there's a merger or acquisition, you're probably just getting a bunch of cash. And same kind of bigger picture considerations. What is the money for? How are you going to manage it? One thing you and I were talking about earlier, in light of the kind of Silicon Valley Bank debacle and some of the other stuff that's happened this spring, is just being really cognizant of FDIC insurance limits. So if you do get, a lot of these transactions we're helping people with, we're talking of, anywhere from a few $100,000 to $3 or $4 million getting paid out at once. You do not want that all sitting in one bank.
Yep.
So being really careful about, taking advantage of FDIC insurance limits and making sure that your money is spread out across a couple different institutions if necessary.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So it just seems like with whether it's a merger and acquisition or a tender offer, it's going to be most likely a high tax year for you. And depending on your situation, it could vary across the board. You might be limited on what you can do to reduce your tax liability, or there could be some things that you could do. Either way, both scenarios do. It seems like with the tax complications, and also just like talking through like what am I going to do with the proceeds, requires some sort of professional, whether financial professional and or an accountant.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think all of the things that you just said, I don't know if I have a whole lot to add, but I think that's great advice to just get those professionals in line as early as possible. But really, the issues are very, very similar. And in many cases, this is a life-changing event, right? So this, like I said, this could be potentially millions of dollars coming to you at once. And some of the people we're working with are quite young, and they're seeing these like huge influxes of cash that they've never seen before. And so I think it's really useful to be as strategic as you can and have somebody guiding you through that process, because it can be very not just life-changing, but it can really change your perception of who you are as a person. Like, oh, all of a sudden I'm a millionaire, or whatever. I think there's a lot of other things that kind of get wrapped into a life-changing situation like this.
Yeah. Whenever we're talking about money, money is very emotional. And especially if it's a large sum, it even gets greater. The emotions can even become greater.
Yeah. One word of caution I would have before we kind of wrap up here is similar to cautionary words that I have around IPOs, is to be really careful about getting advice from coworkers and trying to remove yourself as much as you can from, whether it's the company Slack channel or some kind of Reddit board or something like that. One of the clients we're working with the Stripe situation was talking about just, all of the recommendations that other employees were sharing about, oh, you should do this with the tax withholding, and oh, you should do this. And some of their advice was not very good. And also, I think it can be really distracting. So when you are really immersed in a transaction like this, and it's just sort of all anybody at work is talking about or whatever, it can be really hard to tune this stuff out. And so just being really aware that your coworkers might not know any more than you, and in fact, they might know less, or they might have the wrong information, which is can be potentially damaging. So be really careful about who you're listening to. I mean, everybody means well. I'm not saying anyone's malicious, but I've definitely heard secondhand some of the things that other people are saying in these forums, and it's not accurate.
Yep.
So just be really mindful of that.
Yeah. And also take some time away from all the chaos that might be happening after you think about what your plan is and you have like an actual plan in place.
Yeah.
Like just let it be. Especially when you're figuring out like how much to sell or not, like will the price go higher in the future or not? Like you can see how you can just drive yourself crazy. So the future is unknown. You are doing the best that you can, making the best decision with all the information that you have in the moment. And that's all you can do.
Yeah. Really smart advice to just, take a step back if you can. Once you've sort of established whatever your plan is going to be, kind of try and remove yourself and just, put it out of your head if you can. Obsessively watching, stock prices and sort of following all of the news and all that can be really, it can kind of take over. And the last little bit of advice that I have around all of this kind of stuff is if you are going through something like this and you are expecting, a 6 or 7 figure payout, make sure to do something nice for yourself. It's totally reasonable to carve out whatever X $1,000 for a trip or, a new car or something that you just have always really wanted to do and have never been able to afford to. Like that's completely justified. And I think is a good idea to just, you have worked hard to get to this point. And, if you're seeing a 6 or 7 figure payout, you absolutely deserve to take a little bit and do something fun and treat yourself.
Yes, totally agree. Thank you so much. I hope I hope you have taken one good takeaway from today's session. If you are going through something like this and looking to hire a financial planner, go over to zinafp.com and you can book a consultation just to see if we are a good fit. Anything else before we wrap up?
I don't think so. We'll be back in 2 weeks talking about something else. If you have topics that you want to recommend, let us know. Otherwise, we'll see you next time.
All right. See ya.
Bye.